Hello, hi, hope your day is going swell. I'm once again going to do my obligatory spiel here as I have in the last couple of videos. If you have not refollowed me on my new Twitter account because my old account got suspended, you can do so at the link in the description down below. I also have a link tree down there where you can connect with me on any other social media that I have. I promise I'll stop doing this song and dance eventually, but for now the grind must continue, so thank you so much, and now on to the video. So, when I was a kid, I'm talking like middle school, high school, I unfortunately and admittedly curated my entire personality around being someone who would hypothetically get hired as a quirky BuzzFeed host.
When you have free healthcare, you can eat whatever you want.
That shit is so good.
Fuck, her hand's a little smaller, and so it feels a little different, so we'll have to see. I'm sorry to the person on the other side, this is weird.
Somebody peer into my dreams. Oh my gosh.
You're gonna do awesome things, I can tell.
This sauce is delicious. Have you had this sauce yet?
I've been eating the pizza.
BuzzFeed has always been a fascinating case study for me, because for a website that was so influential in modern day internet culture, you don't really hear about it much now. BuzzFeed was first founded in 2006, and over time it became this sort of larger-than-life content vacuum of everything to do with popular culture and the viral internet machine. Of course, most people are familiar with BuzzFeed listicles and quizzes, harmless little bits of viral content that would pass the time. They caused the beginning of the end of Facebook when they invented BuzzFeed Tasty, and at one point in time they did have a legitimate newsroom called BuzzFeed News, which is now a shell of its former self, but that is a different story for a different day. What I want to focus on today is the downfall of BuzzFeed video, because not only do I think the history of said decline is absolutely fascinating, but it's still having ripple effects in the modern day internet content landscape, and I thought it would be interesting to break it all down. This gets a little confusing because BuzzFeed has a lot of different YouTube channels that have all been named various things over the years, but the main channel of their video branch, BuzzFeed Video, first started posting to YouTube in around 2012. You can see here that it's very much YouTube in its most unoptimized form, and basically most of the videos in this era were their listicles just in a video format. Now I know when you see titles like this you might think, oh, that's just like goofy, bottom of the barrel content. I would never watch something like that. I don't know how people even watch that kind of stuff back when it was popular on YouTube. And I just want to say that, like, anytime somebody on TikTok gives you a cool list of animal facts, or they have you take a 5-question trivia quiz, that's the same kind of content just repackaged. It's literally just BuzzFeed with slightly less steps. From here, BuzzFeed's content sort of evolved down two separate paths. One of these paths being short little internet sketches that mostly focused on humorous, relatable content.
So my niece has to be asleep in a dark room with 2 sound machines, or else...
Or else what?
Oh, I'll just finish the story when you're done. It must be important.
Like a baby would need. Hey, can I borrow $20?
Oh, sure, just pay me back this time.
Allison, I always pay you back.
Of course.
Don't.
They mostly poked fun and made basic commentary on societal norms, and a majority of those sketches live on a channel called BuzzFeed Violet, although they are kind of sprinkled throughout BuzzFeed's online ecosystem. A couple years into the BuzzFeed video experiment is when we start getting some of the more recognizable content sprinkled in with the sketches and these sort of clickbait fun fact videos. This is what I call the everyman experiences the world phase. You know, random Americans try food from other countries and they comment on how gross it is. Random people who don't like kittens get surprised with kittens. Random people get parts of their body waxed, or they try on clothes that are meant for a different gender. It's worth noting here that the video I'm playing on screen right now is actually technically the first ever Try Guys video. I'm sure if you're watching this you're well aware, but Try Guys is one of the most popular series to ever have been produced by BuzzFeed. You know, it's 4 dudes, all with slightly different personalities and backgrounds, trying new things. But what we currently know as the Try Guys initially started out as a random one-off BuzzFeed video that they were known for doing at the time. They pick 4 random people who often were producers at the company, making web content and video content and whatever else. You didn't have to know anything about their names or backgrounds, they were just dropped into this, you know, sterile production environment and asked to try a new thing on camera. This format was successful at the time, given that BuzzFeed's strategy at that time was just to throw whatever they could at the wall to see what sticks. Their channel didn't really have much of an identity and it didn't need one either. All they were trying to do was upload a high output of content in the hopes that for every 5 videos they uploaded, 1 would go extremely viral. Now I understand why BuzzFeed went with this approach in the infancy of the companies using YouTube as a content breeding ground, right? At the time, it was like BuzzFeed, the end of barely political, source-fed, and like maybe one or two others sort of entering this space and figuring out what to do with it. And what I don't think BuzzFeed expected is that over time, people started to latch on to the personalities that were featured more frequently in some of their videos than others, and that gave way to sort of a new BuzzFeed era. So over time, BuzzFeed started producing a number of regular series with reoccurring cast members. Some of these series obviously included The Try Guys, where Ned, Keith, Eugene, and Zach would try different things every episode. Worth It, hosted by Steven Lim and Andrew Ilnicki, where the hosts traveled around and compared different dishes at different price points. And BuzzFeed Unsolved, hosted by Ryan Bergara and Shane Madej, where the pair explored unsolved and paranormal mysteries, tapping into aspects of the true crime genre in a more lighthearted and comedic way. At the peak of BuzzFeed's reign, these videos were absolutely inescapable. They were everywhere. I remember I watched a lot of the old school Try Guys content. I was a big fan of Worth It. I've seen like every single episode. I personally wasn't super into BuzzFeed Unsolved, but I know so many people who watch that show religiously, and I think the appeal was that you could kind of get a little bit parasocially attached to them, and it looked like they were all kind of one big happy family working at BuzzFeed, working in this super fun office. And as we came to learn, that wasn't necessarily the reality.
My real name and my face were associated with something that I had no ownership over.
They own all your intellectual property.
Also made me overly accountable for decisions that were made in other parts of the company that I had nothing to do with.
Also, they fired one of my best friends and collaborators.
You can't make videos outside of BuzzFeed or have outside projects.
You might make some videos that you don't really enjoy because you want to hit those benchmarks.
And they would tell you to write about Beyonce. It wasn't just,
oh, can you write this new GIF list about Beyonce?
You know, it was more like, write about Beyonce. Write about her now.
Now, Why I Left Buzzfeed has become sort of a self-referential meme over the years, with the company itself even referencing it in their own content years later. But basically, these videos started because all of a sudden these producers that were appearing regularly in various series across the platform were suddenly not there anymore, and so these creators would then take to their own channels to explain their absence, the issues that they've had with the company, and where viewers who like their personality could go for future content. It's funny looking back at all of these videos now because I feel like Why I Left Buzzfeed was perceived as such a scandal at the time. Like, oh, a media company is exploiting you for your labor and not treating you right? Like, wow, what a statistical outlier. I'm sure that won't get significantly worse. But bottom line, BuzzFeed was a company that was aiming for infinite growth, and at a certain point, that's not possible anymore, and we're seeing this bubble start to happen again with streaming services now. Cultural trends, especially what's popular on the internet, naturally grow and evolve. And it seems like instead of addressing that fact head on, BuzzFeed put a lot of that pressure on their producers to perform above expectation. Additionally, as content on BuzzFeed Video got more personality driven, the personalities were running into this problem where they were essentially mouthpieces for the company. They were being used for their humor and their wit and their hosting abilities, but were not able to speak for themselves or have any real identity outside of BuzzFeed. Additionally, BuzzFeed still kind of had this problem outside of their more personality driven content where they didn't have much of an identity, and so when some of the stuff that they posted would get criticism, it started to reflect negatively on anyone associated with the brand.
Why do you make women sit around and talk about men in movies
when y'all easily just sit around and talk about boobs for hours?
Why do you automatically assume that you won't like TV or movies that star a female lead?
Why are you surprised when women are funny?
I'm probably funnier than you.
This is just an example of inflammatory BuzzFeed content that made the rounds in around 2016. A lot of it started getting labeled as, you know, anti-SJW content when those kinds of compilations on YouTube were popular. And so while BuzzFeed was just trying to make cultural rage bait, these types of videos accidentally became fodder for the anti-feminist edgelord community that started gaining more popularity around this time. And so it goes without saying that some of these more popular BuzzFeed hosts who did have a following just, you know, for their personalities wanted to distance themselves from that. So I think over time it became easier for these content creators to distance themselves from the brand, to separate themselves completely from their previous BuzzFeed identity and go on their own independent journeys. And while that has its own set of challenges, it proved to be the perfect jumping off point for a lot of these guys because, you know, they were leaving the company that didn't treat them right to make the content that they wanted to make. There was a lot of built-in goodwill there. Now this I'm on my own now model was done with varying degrees of success. For example, content creators like Sophia Nygaard and Michelle Khare were able to build on their successes and what they learned from BuzzFeed and create and expand their own independent productions that at the end of the day they owned. Now when it comes to this method, success may vary, especially if you're going beyond a 1, 2, even 3 person production and forming your own company with 10 plus employees. Sure, you already have your built-in following post-BuzzFeed, but running a company is really expensive, and it can be rather unpredictable in a marketplace like the internet where so many things are changing and there are so many different variables at play. With that being said, let's talk about two of the major companies that were formed post-BuzzFeed, Watcher and the Try Guys. The Try Guys is a tough one for me because I feel like ultimately their departure was a success, at least from what I can see views-wise. I mean, success on the back end is only relative to the size of your company and what you're bringing in profit-wise. But when they launched their new channel independent of BuzzFeed, they were doing really well, pulling in millions and millions of views. I feel like people kind of over-dramatize what happened with the Try Guys because they're still putting out videos and they're doing relatively well, I think. It's just that when the whole Ned Fulmer scandal happened, it was like the drama that everyone was talking about, but like as a business, I don't necessarily think that Keith, Eugene, or Zach did anything wrong. I guess the lesson to pull from the Try Guys, if anything, is that if you lean too hard into making personality-based content, and you perform basically as trademark characters, which is kind of what the Try Guys do to some extent, then it makes it much, much worse when things go wrong. Ned was branded as the wife guy basically since the BuzzFeed days, and then that kind of blew up in their faces in the worst way possible. I also personally think that the Try Guys were at their best format-wise during the BuzzFeed days because they were actually trying a new thing every episode, and now the content on their new channel is a little bit more varied and not all of them appear in every video all the time. But you know, that's just a personal taste thing. Watcher is an even more interesting case to me because they were a really big success story up until about 3 days ago. Watcher is comprised from some of the guys from BuzzFeed Unsolved and Worth It. They made their own production company, their content is very popular, and they recently announced that they were going to be putting all of their content behind a paywall off of YouTube and onto their own streaming service. The reason why they said they were doing this is because they were frustrated with working within the confines of AdSense and YouTube, and as a smaller content creator myself, I personally understand that frustration. I don't do this full time, I don't manage a company, but if I did, I would imagine that depending on YouTube to fulfill the livelihoods of yourself and several other people who work under you is probably the most stressful thing imaginable because it is so unpredictable. And so they decided to put all of their content on a streaming service. They said they were going to charge around $5.99 per month, and this got a lot of backlash mainly because they weren't offering a product for an additional price that was optional. They were taking a product that was previously free and putting it behind a paywall. Now again, on one hand, I understand their frustration because I feel like a lot of people don't understand how difficult it is to make the internet profitable as a business method for yourself or your company, but at the same time, that is a struggle that we are all engaging in and willingly choosing to participate in. Putting the burden on your viewers just because you feel like your company can't achieve the level of output that you want it to achieve quality-wise is probably not the best way to go about things. In fact, I think it squanders a lot of goodwill between the content creator and audience relationship in this scenario because so many people were willing to follow them and support them post BuzzFeed. Actually, as I'm recording this, it looks like they just put out an apology and that they are reversing this decision, so I will drop a clip of that here.
You helped us every step of the way when we left BuzzFeed to start Watcher at the top of the pandemic in 2020.
We regret stating and implying that it's a price that anybody can afford, and we fully acknowledge that it is not. We didn't take the proper consideration for how this cost would affect you, and hope you know that we are taking this as a serious learning experience. With that in mind, we're making some changes to ensure that there's a way for our community to continue watching our content for free.
I think during the Why I Left Buzzfeed era, it was so easy for these content creators to paint BuzzFeed as the villain. And I'm not saying they weren't the villain. Obviously, their content model was not working, it had some flaws, they were working these producers to the bone, and that is not good. But you know, obviously they got a lot of built-in goodwill from that experience because they were leaving the shady evil corporation to go on their own independent endeavors, which in itself is kind of like a noble thing to do narratively. But I feel like as a lot of these content creators started, you know, making their own companies and integrating into the YouTube space that way, they found it to be a lot more difficult than they previously anticipated, and that's where you sort of lose some of that goodwill along the way. As far as the current state of BuzzFeed Video, they're doing okay. It looks like they pivoted a lot more to, you know, promotional celebrity content, because at the very least that'll gain you more of an inherent net, but the views are nowhere near what they used to be. You can still go to their website and take quizzes and read listicles, but it kind of just seems like a graveyard of pop culture's past. And that's the legacy of BuzzFeed, if anything. It helped launch the careers of a lot of the internet's biggest stars, but it seems like during its heyday, no one was really having a good time. Some creators have learned from their former employers' mistakes, while others seem doomed to repeat them. And whether any of this is a legacy worth supporting, I think it's a legacy worth acknowledging. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know it's a little different than what I normally do, but I want to try to do some of these more internet history type deep dives in the future. I think they're really fun and they're really entertaining, hopefully. Let me know in the comments down below who your favorite YouTuber is right now. Give me some recommendations. I'm always looking for people to watch. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.